to David Clark.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. It is with some, I guess, amusement and distress at the same time that I rise to take a call, having only recently learnt of this manual capture of IRD information that is now required as a consequence. I want to suggest an alternative title. I understand my colleagues have suggested alternative commencement dates, perhaps at a time when it won't all have to be used, recorded with a quill pen on paper, but we can adopt some kind of modern system like, I don't know, maybe a computer to record the information. I want to just suggest that maybe we should label this bill for what it is. It is a farce, Mr. Chair. When we have a bill here that talks about doing something but finds ways of creating loopholes to ensure that very thing does not happen. And then on top of that, we learn that the whole thing was so rushed, and let's cast our mind back before the election when the government was under fire for not doing anything about the housing stuff. It ran right through into the new year. This government has been under fire for its lack of response to the housing crisis in Auckland and the effects that that's having on our economy. And then this year, ahead of the budget, they must have been doing their polling. They must have realised that this issue was really coming to a head in public opinion. And all of a sudden, they announced a new tax on housing speculation to try and somehow make it look like they were doing something useful. Of course, we've seen the advice from the Treasury that says the way it was designed will only collect about $5 million in revenue, where if it didn't have all the loopholes that have been thrown in, it would have collected $30 to $40 million and had a bigger deterrent effect. We know that's not effective legislation. Then we've got this complementary legislation here, which is going through right now, which is about collecting the register of persons of foreign speculators. And we know that it's designed to exclude most people. It's designed in a way that makes it full of loopholes, so it won't be useful information that's collected. And we've rehearsed the debates in the previous stages of this bill and in the Part 1 and Part 2 debates about how we will probably find ourselves as a parliament in the next government having to repair the work done on this legislation tonight, to fix those loopholes that we find in the legislation. And we know that passing a bill through this parliament costs more than $1 million with all the officials' time and all of the salaries of the MPs and so on. And we know that we'll be back here correcting this government's mistakes. But this bill should be called a farce because that is what it is. That is what it is. And we've seen this time and time again from this government, particularly where it comes to IT systems. And the IRD computer system, of course, is the grand champion of the scheme. In 2012, on Valentine's Day, the Prime Minister made a promise that he would sort out the IRD computer system. Well, we're still waiting. We're still waiting for real action on that. And the Prime Minister said in the speech where he talked about needing to address this issue, governments should not have to find themselves in a position where they are held hostage to a lack of technology. And that is what we find ourselves here tonight, 3 years on, different computer system, not up to date, and officials required to handwrite the records from when this bill is enacted in October through to December. And we learn in the Official Information Act material that's been supplied that December is an optimistic date. They might be handwriting next year the records that are recorded in this register. And it might be the case indeed that they come back to correct the bill, to make amendments, to actually try and sort this out so that they can push it further out. They've done it before, a corrections issue perhaps. They've pushed it out before. This is what happened with the IRD when they changed the child support legislation. They discovered that the computer systems were not up to scratch and they had to come back and change the legislation, use more parliamentary resource to go back and backtrack so that they could find and make legislation that actually worked. And this is what we may well find with this legislation. We may find that the Parliament spends $1 million or whatever dollars all over again to put new legislation through that repairs this faulty legislation, which doesn't actually collect a register properly of foreign buyers and which uses a manual, paper-based system for the initial months on an optimistic scenario for collecting the details for a foreign buyers register. Mr. Speaker, I think the case is fairly clear for adding the word farce into this title. And I wish the government would have a sense of humour or irony or something and actually consider this serious suggestion from the opposition benches. I look forward to the Minister and the Chair taking a call and saying why on earth this shouldn't be called a farce, because I think the case is pretty clear.